watching part 9 of this series, The Assault on Our Constitution, with special guest and best-selling author Don Brown.
Well, welcome. And I'm here with Don Brown, our continuing saga of the Constitution under fire, a call to action. And, you know, the Constitution is the foundation and it is the authority for our government, for our republic. And we've got a great lesson plan for today. You have really put together some great insights, and go ahead and tell us. I'll let you introduce us and tell us about where we're going today, what we're going to talk about in relation to our U.S. Constitution.
Thank you, Rick. Well, like you say, the Constitution is the basis of our republic. It's something that people don't know about because it's not been taught in the schools. We hear politicians all the time showing a very scary ignorance of it. And so we're here today and other days also to try to correct that. Now, we've done an introduction. We started with the preamble. We went over the very 6 great basic concepts of the preamble to ensure domestic tranquility, provide justice, provide a common defense, and all those. We saw how everything fits there into those 6 great objectives of the preamble. And then we started to examine the great principle of separation of powers, which is one of many, many great checks and balances in the Constitution. And we went into a lot of detail there. Today, we're starting a topic that is very, very much needed because it is the difference between a constitutional republic and a democracy. And you'll recall that I mentioned to you that in law school, most law students don't even have to read the Constitution. We take something called constitutional law. But I've got the standing joke that I've asked a number of lawyer friends, what are the 5 fundamental rights in the First Amendment? Now, since this is not our first show, probably some of our viewers have looked those up.
Got that.
We hope we've got it. We will get to you on that. But the differences between a democracy and a republic are something that we never discuss in law school. It's not really discussed on the bar exam. And we're going to find out today that those differences are tremendous. We're going to go in and we're going to look at what the misconceptions are today, but what the original intent was, and hopefully some ways that we can get back to the original intent.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things you just have to understand when we study, whether it's the Bible or the Constitution or whatever, we have to study with the proper lens. You know, if we're studying the Bible from a position of faith, we know that it's true. We've seen evidence of the truths in the Bible. We believe in the virgin birth, the resurrection of Jesus and his return. We start there, we can learn a lot more. And the same is true with the Constitution. We have to understand exactly what it is we're looking at from a big standpoint. Well, this whole notion of a constitutional republic versus a democracy is one of the biggies. And so that's where we're going to start today.
Yeah, and here's a shocker. We are not a democracy. Matter of fact, there is only one democracy on the planet, Switzerland.
That's it.
You know, Switzerland, where every citizen votes on every law, and their government only carries out what the people vote on. But that's as, you know, as we'll get into today, you would have to be a much smaller country, you know, to even fathom doing that. Many churches cannot operate on that kind of government.
Right.
And why, you know, what is the difference between a democracy and a republic? And we almost always call our republic a democracy, but it's not true. And it is crucial that we get this point and understand why it is a republic and why a republic is so much better.
And not only is there a difference, but in many ways they're diametrically opposite of the other.
Yeah.
And we hear so much ignorance. You know, we hear all this stuff today about, you know, the Russia investigation and how this threatens our democracy. Well, every time I hear that, I want to yell at the TV, look, Senator, we don't have a democracy, we have a republic. And it's senators and congressmen from both parties.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of these politicians who use that phrase mean any ill will. It's largely based upon ignorance. It's largely based upon political expedience because folks don't know what a republic is.
They don't want to have to understand, explain the difference.
But we got to get into it. Is there a difference, and are we a republic or democracy? You've already answered that question, but you're going to show why you're right and what are the differences. So let's explore that question. Let's start with a poll by CNN, our favorite network. I say that facetiously, but at any rate, once in a while they get things right, and I think this particular poll, they probably did get it right. They did a a poll in 2016 and found out that 72% of the people in the United States believe that the United States is still the world's greatest democracy. And you can see the poll, a recent CNN poll found that a solid majority of Americans believe that the United States of America is still the world's greatest democracy. As you pointed out, there aren't that many democracies, and only one that we know of is Switzerland anyway. So we start with some misconceptions. Here's an article from the New York Times in 2017. Just in February of this year, the New York Times and political scientists call us a democracy. And the question is, democracy in America, how's it going? And the article starts that democracy in the United States is strong, but showing some cracks. That is the conclusion of a new survey of 1,500 political scientists. So political scientists think we're that. And the New York Times perpetuates it, and the CNN perpetuates it. Now check this article in the Washington Post, for example. A question in the Washington Post from 2016 in April, do Americans still believe in democracy? And the question is, what's up with democracy in America? Sometimes it seems that American politics grows more polarized and uneven every month. And then it asks, has American political culture taken an anti-democratic turn? So you got CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post. It's not just those three. And by the way, the Washington Post itself, its own logo is the Washington Post, democracy dies in the darkness. So what do they think we are? Obviously, these major networks are calling us that, and people are believing it because we don't know any better. And then it's not just the networks, though. It's what do these modern politicians think we are, Republican or democracy? We got a picture of a few modern politicians of both parties. We have 3 of one party and it looks like 2 of the other. Let's just explore a little bit. Found this article by Bernie Sanders, who, as you know, ran for president last year, and he writes this article, How Corporate Media Threatens Our Democracy. So he's calling the democracy, and he doesn't like the corporate media. Maybe he doesn't like corporate media, but that's what he says that we are. And then there's our former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, who, after having lost the presidential election last year, famously asked, anybody not willing to accept the results of an election is a danger to democracy.
So she's a danger. She's not willing to accept it. She said that. I'm just saying.
She's a danger to something called a democracy, which I think many of them advocate.
Yeah.
And here's Barack Hussein Obama in Charlotte in 2012, the Democrat National Convention. Democracy works. We're going to find out what some of the founders would say about that. But he says democracy works. We just got to want it, not just during an election year, but in all days in between. And I'm not just picking on Democrats. Here's U.S. Senator John McCain in November of 2017, not long ago. United States should not shrink from defending our democracy. And he's calling out RT, which is Russian Times. But the point of the matter is he's calling it that. And again, it's just not a Democrat or Republican thing. Here's the 41st president of the United States, George Herbert Walker Bush, who said that great nations of the world are moving toward democracy. Democracy. And then his son, Bush 43, George W. Bush, says that you cannot put democracy and freedom into a box. And, you know, we could spend all day, we could find politician after politician after politician after politician from both parties basically using the same type of verbiage. Now, so most modern politicians and others call us a democracy.
Right.
So not only that, but these modern politicians seem to think that a democracy is a good thing. And if there's anything that we accomplish today, I hope that by the end of the day, we can share with you all and share with the public that democracy is not a good thing, that we're not a democracy, and that it's in fact a dangerous thing. But that raises the question, Rick, and this is what I find interesting. What did the founders think of this notion of democracy?
Yeah.
You know?
You read what they said about it, and it would scare you. But one thing is some of these guys know the difference.
Right.
But they know it's in the public mentality that democracy, what they're calling democracy, is really a republic, and we think that's where the people rule, the government exists. But that's not it. That's why we've got to understand this distinction, really get this. And it was a terrifying concept to our founding fathers, a democracy.
Right.
They knew, and when you look at it, when you think about it, you will be shocked at the implications and understand why they considered a democracy dangerous. A republic is the only way that we could have a government that is truly of the people, by the people, and for the people.
We'll be right back after this message.
Courage That Changed the World by Rick Joyner. The Extraordinary History of the Knights of St. John. Taking the Land by Rick Joyner. Walk in the Benefits of the New Covenant. America at the Threshold of Destiny by Francis Frangipane. The Power of Intercession to Turn a Country to Christ. Detained by Don Brown. A man and his son dream of freedom but end up in Guantanamo Bay. Treason by Don Brown. Follow Lieutenant Jack Brewer in a case that challenges his beliefs and values. These books retail for $74.96. Get them today for only $55, plus free shipping on domestic orders. To order, dial 803-548-1114 or visit store.morningstarministries.org.
And I think you're right. I think some of them, I'm not convinced that all of them,
Yeah.
but some of them I think do know the difference. But the thing that's scary about this is that some of the ones who do know the difference, I'm convinced, would rather have a democracy than a republic. Because, I mean, you stop, for example, and think about one of the great checks and balances of our constitutional republic, and we'll have a whole show on this, is the Electoral College. And that's one of many, many checks and balances, like presidential veto, or Congress overriding the veto, or the president having commander-in-chiefship of the military, Congress raising the army and declaring war. These are all checks and balances. The Electoral College is a check and balance against tyranny. But you hear all the time in the last presidential election, do away with the Electoral College because it's not fair, they say. See, people who make comments like that are trying to undermine our constitutional republic, either because they don't understand it, don't understand what the founders were trying to accomplish by separating too much power in any one area, or just don't care. Because the more you erode a democracy, the closer you get to tyranny. We're going to see some quotes on that, too, in a little while.
Yeah. And just think about this. We see how fickle the people can be. That's what the founders saw. And we have, like on our college campuses, it seems like a huge movement right now against freedom of speech.
We do.
If we had a democracy, all you would need was a simple majority to say, we don't want the Constitution anymore. We don't like freedom of speech. We want speech controlled. And by a simple majority vote, they could throw out our Constitution and implement laws like that. And then the next group rises up and you throw that out. And then you have this whiplash from government being slung around by simple majorities instead of this core Constitution that is, the stability of our government.
And by the time we're done today, hopefully we will be able to impart a few basic concepts. So it'll be pretty easy, I'm hoping, in a 1, 2, 3 manner to be able to articulate the differences between the two, because we got to be able to do that. One of the things we've got to do, there's that old song, it only takes a spark to get a fire going. There's power in truth. But we can share this information, but we need good Christian folks to learn it and to impart it to others.
Right.
And
share these programs.
Exactly. Share the programs, and we're going to get them into a curriculum also.
Yeah.
I heard you say the other day in one of your rants that, I think it was one of your rants, or maybe it was in one of your sermons, that the next great move of God is small. And so we're starting small groups. And we get so overwhelmed sometimes. I speak a lot, and I'll talk about these issues, and people come up to me and say, what can I do? I feel so overwhelmed. Well, of course, we may feel overwhelmed if we're looking at it in the world's eyes, but there's power in truth, and there's power in persistence, and there's power in prayer.
Yeah.
And so, just because you may be learning some of this information today that you've never heard before, whatever your sphere of influence is, take advantage of the sphere of influence the Lord has given you to try to impart truth and teach. We've got to do it if we're going to survive.
Absolutely. That's what means to be the salt and the light we're called to be.
We see a few photos now on the screen of some of our founding fathers. We see George Washington up top, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams. The far right, lower right is Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, and we see James Madison, the author of the Constitution, Alexander Hamilton. We're going to hear from some of these guys. We're going to start with the guy, and you mentioned it already about some of the founders. By the time we're done, I hope there's going to be no ambiguity as to what the founders thought of democracy with Thomas Jefferson. This is a very famous quote from Jefferson. The quote is debated. Some say that he did say it. Some say he did not say it. It's generally accepted. But whether he said it or not, and I think he probably did, but it is true because it's just articulate what you said, that democracy is nothing more than mob rule. Like you said, where 51% of the people may take away the rights of the other 49. So it's just a matter, I remember a few years ago during the presidential election of 1992, when Bill Clinton was first elected, Ross Perot had gotten involved, and he had this cockamamie idea: why don't we just let everybody vote on every little thing with their laptops? On every law, everybody vote with their laptops.
That's what Switzerland does.
Right, but he obviously had no concept of a number of the checks and balances, including the Electoral College and what was originally the appointment of senators. Now they're directly elected. The fact of the matter is there's very few democratic principles in the Constitution. The only democratic principle that was originally included in the Constitution was direct election of the House of Representatives.
Right.
So Jefferson was very, very clear. Now let's take a look at the guy who wrote the words of the United States Constitution. This is James Madison. James Madison, of course, was our fifth president, and I think I got that right. I have to count him up. He's either our fourth or our fifth. At any rate, he was the man who wrote the Constitution. He was the principal writer of it, though he had input from the founders in the Constitutional Convention. He also wrote the principal architect of the Bill of Rights. He said this: democracy is the most vile form of government. The most vile form of government. Now, my education may be limited, so I took the next step of checking a Merriam-Webster definition of vile.
Yeah.
Now, Madison said it's the most vile form of government. Check that out. Vile, the first definition is morally despicable or abhorrent.
That's pretty serious.
Yeah. Nothing is as vile as intellectual dishonesty, physically repulsive, of little worth or account. I mean, vile back in those days was one of the most, hard charging.
That was a strong word.
Yeah.
It would probably be cursing today.
For the late 1700s, that's probably about as rough as you can get. It's like some of the things Trump might do now on Twitter. Man, he really let him have it.
Yeah.
But Madison, the author of the Constitution, actually, first of all, he's all over the top of democracy. He doesn't think much of it. There are some more quotes from Madison. And he says that democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible, get this, with personal security or the rights of property, and have been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths. That's pretty rough. I've taken some notes, and by the way, everyone out there in television land, the internet land, we'll try not to go so fast so that you won't be able to take notes off some of the screen, but we try to basically condense some of this. So Madison's view is democracies are, first of all, spectacles of turbulence and contention, and that's pretty bad. Incompatible, get this, with not only personal security rights but property rights.
Right.
You remember when we talked about Article 1, Section 8, of the Constitution was just Congress power. And when we look at that against the preamble, that one of the things that people wanted to do was to ensure domestic tranquility. That's peace in the streets. Article 1, Section 8 gives the Congress the right to send in a militia to quell domestic disturbances where there is violence. What Madison is saying, that democracy is incompatible with personal security or property rights. It reminds me of some of these very, very violent demonstrations we've seen over the last couple of years. It says it's short-lived and they end violently. And that's James Madison, the father of the Constitution. And here's John Adams, our third president, who echoes a lot of that. And he says, remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There was never a democracy that did not commit suicide.
And that was accurate.
Yes, exactly.
That was an accurate statement.
Exactly. And not just John Adams. I know you've talked about, we'll talk about it later, but Benjamin Franklin, another one of our great founding fathers, who we'll have his quote later when he was asked on the streets of Philadelphia, what have you done for us, Mr. Franklin? But Franklin said, now get this. This sounds like a Rick Joyner quote to me, you know.
Yeah. I'm going to borrow it.
Yeah, like when you told me the other day, what was it about, you know, when you have an interview with a journalist, it's like either having lunch with a lion or getting what?
Yeah, it's like having lunch with a lion. You can have a nice lunch, or you could be the lunch.
Yeah, that stuck with me. So when I saw this quote by Franklin, I thought of you, Rick, because Franklin said, a democracy is 2 wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch.
Right. What do you think it'll be?
Right.
It won't be wolf.
Well, that's why they say it destroys itself. And one other, these...
And think about that. I mean, one of the things that is dear to the heart of American people is caring for the underdog, for the minorities, that their rights not be violated, they not be mistreated. And that's one thing a republic ensures.
Absolutely.
Because in a democracy, the majority could at any time just wipe out the minorities, say, leave our country, whatever.
Absolutely.
This ensures that the lamb gets protected, that the minorities get protected. We need to get these concepts in our mind.
Absolutely. It's very, very important that we understand. First, if there's one big concept to understand coming out of today is democracy bad, republic good. Republic good, democracy bad. And when you hear somebody say, our democracy, correct them. Say, I think what we have is a constitutional republic, not a democracy.
You're watching part 9 of this series. You won't want to miss upcoming Prophetic Perspectives episodes where we continue examining how our Constitution has been violated and is now being attacked, and what we must do to see it restored to its place as the foundation of our republic and the supreme law of the land.
on TV, online, on the go, and on your iPad. Tune into Prophetic Perspectives with Rick Joyner, always available on MorningStarTV.com.